Hello, this is Jonathan with Steel Bear Academy. Today I'm going to be answering the question of when is the right time to pick a revolver for self-defense. We're going to be talking about two main types of roles. Concealed carry, meaning you're going to carry it concealed on your body in a holster, and home defense, meaning you're not going to carry it in a holster. You'll probably have it somewhere in a quick access safe or in your safe, but it is supposed to be ready to go to defend yourself in your home. So those are the two roles we're going to be talking about today. So I got some revolvers on the table here, as well as a semi-auto to show you. Go over which one of these are very quickly. These guns have all been safety checked, but as always, you can check with me as well. This is a 686 plus in 357 Magnum. These are actually all in 357 Magnum. This is a Model 66 Smith & Wesson. This is a 6-shot. This is a 7-shot, by the way. And this is a Model 637 J-frame in 38 special only. And this is a Springfield 1911. Loaded. That's the name of it. It's not loaded as in the, there's no rounds in it. So let's talk about why you would choose a revolver for your defensive needs. So number one is simplicity. So revolvers are incredibly simple to use. All you have to do is basically load them. You put your rounds directly into the chambers, which are these 5 holes here. You close it, and it is ready to fire. There's no manual safeties to disengage. All you gotta do is pull the trigger. So they're incredibly simple. And a lot of people really like that because if you keep it simple, you'll make less mistakes. The more steps you add, the more likely you are to make some mistakes along the way. So for both concealed carry and home defense, those are both desirable traits. It's a desirable trait to be simple. Second thing we want to talk about is reliability. So every gun that you're using for defensive purposes should be incredibly reliable, should be as close to 100% reliable as possible. And these guns are very reliable. So, the likelihood of you having any sort of malfunction on one of these is pretty unlikely, so long as you keep it clean. So this is one of the stipulations of this, and it's kind of gets into a larger discussion in general, but let's have it now. So when people talk about the reliability of a revolver, they're talking about how you're very likely to have 5, 6, or 7 rounds that are almost 100% likely to be fired, to be fireable, meaning you're not going to run into any of the problems that a semi-auto can have, because a semi-auto typically has a slide that moves back and forth. In fact, can't really think of any that don't. They have some sort of mechanism that moves back and forth. They typically have a magazine, a detachable magazine. Those can lead to problems. You have to make sure you hold the gun tightly to make sure you don't induce any malfunctions when it's ejecting or trying to chamber a new round. You have to make sure that you did chamber a round. It's very important. If you don't remember to chamber a round, you won't even be able to fire this. You also have to remember on some guns with safeties, you have to make sure you turn the safety off. The multitude of malfunctions you can have due to a semi-auto are plentiful. They are often caused by user, meaning the shooter. However, they can also be caused by wear and tear on springs, dirtiness, those kinds of things. So when people talk about the reliability of a revolver, it is true that you won't have any of the problems of a semi-auto because it's not semi-automatic. You're not going to have that slide moving back and forth. However, you do need to be aware that a revolver can get dirty. As you shoot it, it will get dirty, and you will, at some point, if you don't clean your revolver pretty meticulously, you might discover that you'll get carbon built up underneath the ejection star. You'll get carbon built up on the front of the cylinder. You might get carbon built up on the forcing cone. And all of those things can lead to your revolver malfunctioning. So, the reliability is there. However, I think it's often oversold against the semi-auto, meaning most semi-automatics nowadays are very reliable. In principle, yes, they malfunction far more. Like, there's just more things that can go wrong. Most of them could be caused by the user or, you know, all the various parts that work on this. So yes, they're more reliable, but you know, you shouldn't think of this as unreliable. You know, a semi-automatic by itself is not unreliable. It's just, it is not as simple. So simplicity, reliability, they kind of go hand in hand in this case. So you're very likely to have 7, 6, 5 rounds, whereas this one, I have never had any malfunctions with this gun. However, it is very possible that one of my magazines malfunctions, or, you know, it gets dirty and slows down the slide and it doesn't eject around from when you fire it. So it can happen. I don't want to belabor the point, but that is one of the things that most people who really like revolvers really like about them. But for me, I think that so long as you maintain either of these guns, you know, revolvers or a semi-auto, your gun should work most of the time. I don't think it's really fair to say that a revolver has like a massive advantage. It's a slight advantage under certain circumstances. But if you give it a fair shake on both sides, keep these clean, keep this oiled, keep this oiled as well, they should all work perfectly fine. I have not had any malfunctions with any of these guns, except for when one of these gets dirty or one of these gets dirty. So, take it for what it's worth. Capacity. This is one of the main downsides of the revolver. You only get 7, 6, or 5 rounds before you have to reload. So, the cylinder only can hold so many rounds. This one can only hold 5. This one is definitely meant for more of a concealed carry role, whereas this one kind of could flex into both. This one is, because of its long barrel, probably is more suited to a hunting role or a home defense role, just because it's going to be very hard to conceal. Whereas a semi-auto on a flush fitting magazine, this gun is going to hold 7 plus 1 in the chamber. With a slightly extended magazine, holds 8. Other semi-autos can hold much more. A Glock 17 can hold 17 rounds in the magazine, and it's going to weigh less than this gun. It's going to weigh less than this gun. It won't weigh less than this gun. It's going to weigh a lot less than this gun too. So capacity is a big deal. You can shoot a lot more rounds quickly after the first, once you have shot your initial rounds in the gun, it's much quicker to reload a semi-auto. Reloading one of these is very hard. So, if you think you're going to need more rounds than 7, 6, or 5, that could really inform your decision about what you want to do here. It's important to think about what is the role for these guns. If this is a concealed carry gun, how many rounds might you need if you were going to have to defend yourself in a self-defense situation outside your home? What's the typical number of rounds that somebody might shoot? I think the general consensus is it kind of has an average of 3, but could be more, could be less. Generally not more than 7, not very many. So these should, in theory, have enough rounds to cover your ass in self-defense situations outside of the home. In the home is probably, even if we gave it the worst case scenario, you have the highest number of rounds shot based on what I just said. Even if it's 7, this one can hold 7, so it will probably be enough. There are outliers where it's not enough, but nobody ever lamented having too many rounds in their gun, so long as it didn't come at a significant downside. So when you're talking about having 8 in this gun, or in a Glock 17, 18 rounds, More is always better if you can, if it doesn't come at a significant cost. So, you know, capacity is one of the biggest limitations of the revolver. You know, from where I sit, the revolver, 7 rounds, 6 rounds, 5 rounds, this is plenty for concealed carry most of the time. Sometimes it's not. You have the option of reloading these, but it's a challenge. It's not that easy to reload a revolver, especially under stress, unless you practiced it a lot. It's a lot easier to reload a semi-auto, even under stress. It's just way easier in general. So capacity, it's important. The weight. Most revolvers are going to be all metal. So this gun is all steel, this gun's all steel. This gun is mostly aluminum in the body. So you might be able to see there's some differences of color. Kind of this lighter silver is aluminum, and this kind of more metallic-y color on the cylinder here and the barrel, that's stainless steel. So this gun is far lighter than you might have expected. It's very light. It's made to be carried. This gun is all steel. Most 1911s are metal. I don't think there are any polymer ones, but you know, you'll always have the large amount of steel on the slide. Even a Glock, you've got the polymer frame, but generally a semi-auto is going to weigh less for the amount of rounds that you can carry. Unfortunately, that's just kind of the name of the game. Even a 686 with a shorter barrel, you know, a 2.5 inch or a 3 inch barrel, it's really very heavy. Like the weight on these guns, this gun definitely is more unwieldy, but it's also significantly heavier. So weight can be a big factor for somebody, especially if they're not, you know, very strong. If they have a hard time holding that gun out there, you know, it might be a big deal if you can't keep that weight out there, or even trucking this around. You know, for concealed carry rolls, this gun is very heavy. This gun is pretty heavy. This gun is pretty darn light, so you can actually carry this gun very easily. A 1911 is quite a heavy gun. You can carry other semi-autos that are polymer framed, so those are going to be much easier to carry, but it's pretty rare to find a light revolver. There are some, but they're pretty few and far between, and they often cost quite a bit of money. So you can get a scandium framed J-frame like this, and it's, you know, about $1,000. You can get a polymer framed semi-auto handgun for, you know, sometimes as low as $200 or $300. So generally they're a little cheaper as well. Weight is going to not be a big factor in a home defense gun. So if you're going to have this as a home defense gun, meaning the 686, the weight's not a big deal. The weight actually can be helpful because it's so heavy. It's going to soak up the recoil of 357 Magnum very well. So it's going to be very pleasant to shoot, and it'll just be pleasant to shoot at the range as well. We kind of talked about the difficulty of reloading, but we should also talk about the difficulty of shooting them. So the lighter your gun, so these really light guns are quite challenging to shoot. They have a surprising amount of recoil, and all double action guns, so these guns are all double action, meaning when you pull the trigger, it'll cock the hammer and allow it to fall, so 2 actions. Any double action gun is going to be very unforgiving in your lack of trigger control. So if you're somebody who can barely pull the trigger and you know, you have to really accelerate your finger, you really have to, you know, exert a lot to pull that trigger, and you don't have good control over it, you're going to end up missing a lot with a double action gun. As opposed to a single action gun, like one of these, the trigger only performs one function. It drops the hammer. And these guns have a very nice trigger pull. Very nice, very light, very crisp. Very easy to fire this gun. Even if it has more recoil than you might normally be comfortable shooting, the lightness of the trigger allows it to very easily stay on target and pull the trigger without interrupting and changing where your sights are. If you change where your sights are, you change where your barrel's pointing, that'll change where you hit. So even though the revolver is very simple to use, like, you know, all you got to do is open the cylinder, load the rounds, close the cylinder. That part is simple. However, the double action it is harder than you might think to be really accurate with a revolver. It's not impossible. And if you only practiced these types of guns, I'm sure you get very good at it pretty quickly. However, most people don't practice enough to get good at them, and you know, if you move back and forth between shooting double action and semi-auto or single action, you know, you might not develop that quickly enough. Typically those people who want the ultra simplicity because they might not want to learn how to shoot a semi-auto or don't want to learn how to manipulate all the, you know, do all the manipulations of this gun that you'll have to learn how to do. They may gravitate toward the simplicity, but that often goes along with them not wanting to practice very much. So, you know, you want to be aware of, if you're choosing this for yourself, you know, be aware. Are you going to practice a lot? Are you going to get really good at shooting these guns? You're going to have to practice reloading a lot, because you're going to have to reload a lot because they don't have very many rounds. So, you know, the revolver, I would say, is a much easier gun to learn. Like, I could show you how to use this gun in, you know, 5 minutes. Very, very easy to show you how to learn, show you how to shoot it, or show you how to load it and unload it. The semi-auto requires more practice to learn it. It has more stuff going on. There's more to learn. However, I would say in shooting it, just in terms of raw accuracy, hitting the target, the single action trigger of this gun makes it much easier to learn how to hit very accurately with it. That doesn't mean you can't miss with this. Of course you can, but the learning curve, I think, is much, you know, it's much steeper on this gun. It's much flatter on this type of gun here. So just something to think about, particularly if you're buying this for somebody else, or you think somebody else might want to use it. You know, particularly in the home defense role, you want to make sure that they get a lot of practice in it as well. Let's talk about the calibers. The semi-auto can be chambered in a lot of calibers. There's a lot of semi-auto calibers out there. 380 ACP, 9mm, 40 Smith & Wesson, 45 ACP, which this one's chambered in. There's larger ones as well, 10mm. These guns are all chambered in 38 Special or 357 Magnum, so these ones are. And that gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of how you choose to shoot your gun. Meaning, if you want to, with a 357 Magnum gun, you can shoot the full power 357 Magnum as it was intended, just like God intended, right? You get a full power round. It's a powerful little handgun round. You shouldn't think of it as, you know, it's not the hand of God. It's just more powerful than most other semi-auto calibers. But, you know, is power really that important to you? Is it really important in a self-defense gun used against humans? It really is not. You have the benefit of having certain scenarios where the 357 Magnum is very, very good. However, if you normalize all the scenarios to say, okay, what does it look like when you just shoot a bad guy with regular clothing? You're not going through any barriers, and you get to pick the best bullet technology you can in all the guns. They all perform very similarly, meaning there's not one. You don't get a whole lot more by having the extra recoil of 357 Magnum and the extra muzzle blast and the extra noise. Should be aware that you're probably going to damage your hearing shooting any of these guns without hearing protection, but the 357 Magnum is a very loud caliber to shoot. With the semi-autos, you get more options. Almost all revolvers that are for self-defense are in 38 Special or 357 Magnum. You can get ones in 44 Magnum. You can get ones in a semi-auto caliber, like 9mm or 10mm. It's kind of the main ones. You can get larger calibers that are more for hunting, but you wouldn't use those for self-defense. You could, but they're not really, you don't gain anything by it, and you also gain a ton of recoil, so there's no point in doing that. So, when you pick the revolver, you have the benefit of going all the way from the high loads all the way down to the low loads with low recoil and a little less performance, and then everything in between. So you can practice with the very light recoiling 38 Special. If you're somebody who's very recoil sensitive, you can load it with the really light loads, and that could be a plus for you. With any semi-auto caliber, you're pretty much limited to only shooting that caliber out of your handgun, and they are usually tuned to run only on the regular ammo that every 45 ACP shoots. There isn't like a whole wide range of power level, because you need to tune the gun to run with a certain amount of powder, a certain amount of recoil, a certain amount of, all that stuff to make sure your slide cycles every time. If you start going too low of power, then it's not going to cycle. If you start going too high of power, then it's really going to slam back and it's going to wear your gun out. So there's a pretty narrow band of power that you can shoot out of one of these. Whereas on these, you have a wider band of options. It's not really like that should be your deciding factor, but if you want that flexibility, these guns can do it. The semi-autos are really not intended for that. So, kind of got some pros and cons here. I want to talk about some scenarios that you might choose a revolver over a semi-auto. So, scenario one is you don't want to, you don't have any desire to, or you can't learn how to use a semi-auto. So, that's really dependent on the person. So let me give you an example. Let's say your hands are not strong enough to rack a slide on any gun, let's say, for whatever reason. Maybe you only have access to one hand. That'd be a possibility. If you only had access to one hand, it's going to be very hard to do a two-handed operation. You could use your boot or something, but this is a two-hand operating gun. If you wanted to push this against something and try to rack your slide, either on the sights or something else, it's probably just, you probably just wouldn't choose that if you only had one hand, or you were your hands are severely weak or something. That might be a time where you might choose one of these. You can much more easily do one-handed manipulations of a revolver if you needed to. Some people will, use their other hand to cradle the gun or whatever. I've seen it done, but that's something to consider. Additionally, a lot of people really like the revolvers because it's so easy to see if it's loaded or unloaded. You just open the cylinder and, oh, there it is, it's unloaded. Very easy to see that. If they don't want to have to mess with the complexity, and I say that not because I'm trying to act like this is some very challenging tool to use. It's not. It really isn't. It's very simple. However, if somebody, whether you or somebody else who you're thinking about sharing one of these guns with, has a mental block about using a semi-auto, they don't understand it, they don't want to learn it, then the revolver can be a very good compromise for that. But it does come at a cost, right? There's not we kind of have already went over some of the pros and cons of these, but the revolver has downsides. The SemiAuto has downsides. The SemiAuto has pluses. Excuse me. And the revolver has pluses as well. So scenario 1 is they don't want to learn it, or they can't do it. Scenario 2 is you are just more comfortable with a revolver. Maybe you grew up shooting revolvers. Maybe you just always have liked them and gravitated toward them, and you understand them very well, and your confidence is high with them. There's something to be said about just being very confident with your gun. I'm pretty confident with all these guns. However, to be completely honest, I am less comfortable with these guns because I haven't shot them nearly as much as I have a SemiAuto. So even though I could use these guns, in my mind there's kind of like a mental block of, I know that I'm not as good with these guns, so I perhaps wouldn't perform as well. And so then I might choose the thing I know very well, the thing I have shot more. But it could also go in the reverse. Maybe you just grew up with these, and these are the things you're comfortable with. Comfort is a big factor. Maybe you want the safety of having a double action, meaning a double action trigger pull. Let me give you a little story about somebody. I knew a guy who, when he had some arthritis or something in some of his fingers, and he wasn't able to curl his middle finger, or he wasn't able to articulate his index finger. So normally people shoot with their index finger. He was not able to do that, so he had to shoot with his middle finger. Now, on a SemiAuto, what he would have to do is normally we'd hold our finger along the frame like this when we would rack our slides. If he was going to do that, he would have to bring up his fingers all the way up here, because this the index finger had to be straight, and so he would have to rack it like this, and he misses out on a sizable amount of his grip strength because he's only gripping with these 3 fingers now. It's not very easy. And so his finger, as everybody's does, tends to want to slip into the trigger guard. And so for him, it was fortunate for him that he had a very heavy, long pull, double action pull for his gun. Because if he had a gun more like one of these and he was trying to, let's say, get the round out of the chamber, it's very likely that he might have, accidentally pulled his trigger, because his fingers had some challenges, and it was extra hard for him to be able to hold tight enough while keeping these fingers extended and rack the slide. In his case, it was advantageous to have a double action pull, because you can put a significant amount of weight onto this trigger, and you're not going to accidentally pull this trigger. I'm kind of trying to pull it, and it takes a lot to pull it. So if you're somebody who doesn't have the best trigger discipline, if you're somebody who kind of lets their finger slip on here, or maybe you're going to use the gun with somebody who doesn't have such a good trigger discipline, a double action gun can be a helpful tool for you while you're teaching them how to have better trigger discipline. Because you don't ever want, I don't want to tell you that can be a substitute for having good trigger discipline, because it can't. There is no substitute for that. That is something you must learn and must comply with. You must do that. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. You need to learn how to do that. However, in the real world, I can't know everything about everybody, and if you're somebody who is with, maybe you live with somebody who you are going to share this gun with, typically a spouse, maybe for you want to hedge your bets. You know that maybe they don't practice as much, and you think that in the heat of the moment, they're going to forget and they don't want to practice it. You know, on the one hand, I think to myself, well, you shouldn't let them touch your guns at all, but that's not probably what you're going to do. I'm not going to recommend you do that, but I'm not going to recommend you let them use your guns at all unless they're safe. But maybe for you, if you think that is part of the scenario that's important for you, that they need to have a heavy trigger pull to make sure that they really need to pull that trigger in order to fire it. They are not going to accidentally pull it. Oh, what, you know, oh, ooh, you know. You don't want to set somebody up for failure if you already know the problems ahead of time. You know, this is kind of one of the reasons I don't recommend people buy a gun with a safety. Because if you have a safety on your gun, you're probably going to forget to turn it off. Everybody does it. It's just something that is normal to humans. So I would say another scenario is if you think that having a double action trigger pull on your gun is important for some reason in terms of safety. You know, I think that everybody should learn how to just have good trigger discipline, have their finger along the frame here, know that their finger is going to naturally want to wander in here, but you can't do that. You have to keep it over here. Every ergonomic part of this gun is telling me to put my finger on the trigger. That's the way the gun is designed. That's how you are inclined to want to hold it. But this is part of learning how to use handguns or any gun safely, is knowing to have good trigger discipline. That's not something that I would ever suggest somebody buy a gun to work around learning how to do that. But, you know, I think I've made my point. If that is a scenario that is helpful to you, like maybe somebody doesn't want to learn, for example, but you want them to be able to use a gun, that's a pretty specific scenario, and I hope that somebody like that would instead choose to come to someone like me to help them learn, or, you know, some other person who can help them learn so that they can be safe. But if that can't happen for some reason, if that is not possible to happen, maybe they won't do it, then one of these types of guns might be a good choice for them. Probably a double action only revolver would be a good choice. That way they don't accidentally have the problem of cocking the hammer, and now they have that very, very light single action pull. Just something to think about. Fourth reason you might choose a revolver is you just shoot them very well. Like I said, they're not the easiest gun to master, but if that's all you shoot, you'll probably get really good at it, and you'll probably be very confident hitting with these guns. So if you shoot them well, then, you know, you should gravitate toward the thing you're really confident with, just like I would gravitate toward the SemiAuto. Another possibility is you might just like them. You know, there's something very like simple and elegant about a revolver. They're very like, I don't know, they're like a timepiece, like a watch, or, you know, a car, particularly an older car where you can see all the mechanics moving and you're like, wow, I can really appreciate the mechanics of that. Or if you're somebody who really likes them for maybe, you know, movies or something. If you grew up watching Dirty Harry and you want to get the Dirty Harry gun, you know, I don't recommend you get a 44 Magnum as your first gun, but if you want to start off with something much more manageable, like a 686, and then move yourself up to the Dirty Harry Model 29 or 629 or whatever you want to get, you know, I got no problem with you picking a gun you like. It's your life, it's your safety that you're taking into account. And if you think that that's a good gun for you, then I'm not going to tell you not to. It wouldn't be the gun I'd choose for myself, but I'm just here to help you make a somewhat informed decision. So I'm trying to give you the information so you can make your own choice. And if you just like them, the thing about liking it is you will practice more. So if you like it, you'll probably practice more, and practicing is far better than you selecting a ideal gun that you never shoot. I'd much rather you have a gun that you shoot a lot because you love shooting it than I would you having a ideal gun that you never shoot. That's much better, right? Another option might be another reason you might choose a revolver is because a revolver doesn't have a reciprocating slide like one of these. Every time you shoot a round, this has to reciprocate. It has to move back and forth to be able to eject a spent round, load a new one from the magazine. And because of that, it necessitates you having excess space back here. There has to be enough room for your gun to move. Your slide has to have enough room to move back and forth, and you can't slow this down in any way. So you can't have it touching anything. You can't touch it yourself. If you're holding the gun like so, you might slow down the slide so much that it can't cycle. And so on a revolver, because you only have to be able to allow the cylinder and the hammer to move, there is less surface area that can interrupt your ability to fire this gun. You probably already are knowing where I'm going with this if you've been around guns for very long. But the reason a lot of people buy these guns is because they have been told that they can be fired inside of a purse. So this is particularly, important for ladies, but maybe you're a Jerry Seinfeld and you have a European carry-all. Who knows? But you can shoot a revolver much easier in an enclosed space, like a purse or a pocket, or in a tussle. So if you're, bunched up against somebody and you want to shoot the gun, you can shoot the gun from here, but you couldn't repeatedly shoot a semi-auto from here because the slide would get in the way, right? So from here, you can pull the trigger, you can fire the gun. A lot of ladies like it because they perceive themselves concealed carrying it in a purse. It's a reason, to do it. You'd probably want to get a double action only for that, a shrouded hammer. I generally don't suggest you do any sort of purse carrying because you're very likely to lose it, lose your purse or leave your purse somewhere, and you always have to have your purse with you at all times. And based on when I've watched women with their purses, that doesn't always happen. So it's much better to have the gun on your body in a holster all the time whenever you're concealed carrying. That way you don't run into that problem. And that way you'll always have the gun on you if you need it as well. However, if you are going to use a purse, make sure you pick a purse that is dedicated for purse carry. Make sure you have it in some sort of holster that completely enshrouds the trigger guard so that you don't accidentally get it pulled on anything. So that's another reason you might choose a revolver if you have that unique scenario. You want to purse carry it. So, there's a lot of pros and cons. There's no right perfect answer in terms of this is the gun to choose or this is the gun to choose. Everything has pros and cons. Everything has consequences for when you choose something, you lose something. When you choose something, you gain something as well. So for myself, I love these guns. However, the only gun that I'm going to incorporate into my defensive regimen is this gun because it's so light. It is so light, and you can see how it's relatively narrow. It's it's just a little bit thicker than the 1911. There are thinner guns than that for sure, but for me, I really like how light it is. I like how it's kind of amorphous. It's not a particularly, When you look at one of these, you might not instantly recognize it as a gun if you're trying to avoid printing. You know, that printing is where your gun is visible in some way through your clothing. So this gun could be used for me in a concealed carry role. I choose to carry a SemiAuto as my carry gun, as my everyday carry gun. I don't choose this gun. I choose a lighter gun. I choose a Glock 17, but for me, it's really a matter of knowing that I shoot those guns better. I like the capacity. I like having the reload, the ability to reload very easily and very quickly. For me, those are the kickers. This gun used to be one of my carry guns, and I was trying it out, seeing if I liked it, but it's heavier, it weighs more than my Glock, it holds 6 rounds instead of 18, and I don't shoot it as well. And it's like, I'm not gonna, it's very rare for me to want to carry a gun that I get that is heavier, holds less rounds, and I don't shoot as well. Like, that's, you should pick the gun that you shoot the best, that you are comfortable with, that is the easiest to carry, and you'll actually carry it. So for me, that's the kicker. Those 3 reasons: the weight, the number of rounds, and the fact that I shoot the SemiAutos better. So I hope this has been helpful for you. You know, I can't tell you everything there is to know about these guns, and you certainly shouldn't take this as a supplement or you know, it's a supplement. It's not a replacement for in-person dedicated training with somebody who is competent. So if you're looking for training in my area, which is San Luis Obispo County in California, you can reach us at steelbearacademy.com. My name is Jonathan. I hope you've enjoyed listening today, and you know, leave a comment below. Why'd you choose one or the other? What was the kicker for you? Have a good night, everybody. See you later.